of this one.
I thought it was a storage shed.
Yeah, so what I did was I just put darks and used a pencil to guide myself and just brought it up. Put a few darks behind the buildings. I took a little bit of Watercolor, a little bit of opaque white, and I just dropped it in the dome of the light so it was more evident that there was a light. Put the birds in, put in some wires. I had an extra telephone pole because it looked like that span of wires was a little bit too unrealistic. Put in some grasses down here and put some darks on the shadow side of the pilings and the dock itself. And then I had skipped as I was hurriedly doing the sky. There was a big blob of white right here. So I just put a garbage can.
Oh.
So if you make those kind of errors, you think, okay, instead of getting really elaborate about it, what else would you expect to find in that setting, and so on and so forth. And of course the birds. So, okay, let's get this guy out of the way. All right, this one. We're gonna have some fun with this one because it's gonna be, I hope, real loosey-goosey. I hope you really loosen up on this one because we're not into detailed architectural rendering. The thing about this image, and I forget where I saw it, but it's fallen in on itself, and by virtue of the lack of symmetry and right angles, it seems to be kind of interesting. But one thing we've done, or I should say, one thing we've not done for this entire series of classes, we've never put any clouds in the sky. So this week and next week, don't let me forget to give you the sketch for next week, but this week and next week, we're going to introduce clouds using two different methods. First method is going to be lifting, which is pretty easy. The next one, it might be a little more challenging, but we'll talk about that later. Let me slide this over a little bit.
You lifted those clouds?
Okay, pardon?
You lifted those clouds in that?
This one?
No,
this
one.
one? No. No, I did not. That is the technique for next time. But this time we'll lift the clouds using tissue. Okay, so I'm going to start with the sky. And I'm going to wet it a little bit. I'm not going to wet it. If you remember last week's sky was a lot of water, a lot of paint, a lot of blending. I'm not really worried about that too much. It's going to be a single color of cerulean blue. And so let me just go ahead and get cerulean blue on the palette before I start wetting the paper. So I'm going to clean the brush. Now I think what's going to happen here is that I just cleaned the brush, but I didn't wipe it or anything like that. It's got a little bit of water tainted with the cerulean blue. But think about this for a minute. If you're going to go into the sky or any very wet wash, and you're going to wet the paper first, sometimes it's good to know where you wet the paper. So if the water has got a little bit of color, it doesn't contrast with what you're planning later on. It's tells you where you're going. See. So. Now, I'm not worried about the telephone pole. I'm not worried about the trees or the foliage or anything like that, because you'll remember this in watercolors, you always paint light to dark, right? So let's see. Okay, that looks good. Not too wet. So now we'll come in with the cerulean blue. Oh yeah, this is the Cheryl Gruber technique right here.
I can't even get one.
Lots of color, baby. That's what we're talking about. Lots of movement. Boom. Okay, so tissue. I'm going to form the clouds with the tissue, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to swirl it off. I'm going to turn it. So I've got clean tissue here. Okay, bingo. Now, the reason you swirl it instead of dabbing is because, especially if you're using a paper towel, you don't want to leave a footprint of the tissue with a paper towel. But when you swirl, what happens is you pick off the paint, but some of it stays behind, and some of it stays behind in kind of a wispy fashion. So it really appears like you've got 3 dimensions in the clouds because some of that paint stays and appears to be shadows in the cloud itself. So that's step number 1. Oh, I did forget one thing, and that is I've got a window here that's going to have a little bit of color in it. Just kind of blend that out a little bit. I don't want it to be quite so stark. There we go. Okay, so painting vertically, you invariably get a bead of paint that wants to play havoc with your painting. So let's pick it up with a thirsty brush. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna stop for a second before I say it's your turn. Let me just show you another way to do this. So this paint is starting to dry. Now I could have put in all of that sky and let it dry, and then decided, oh, I need clouds. So how would I do that? Magic toothbrush, right? I'll show you. So clean water, clean toothbrush, and I'm just gonna so I can lift clouds that way. So I got a little bit more white space there because of doing that. So those are the 2 ways to lift paint wet, paint dry with a Kleenex or a paper towel. And I would strongly recommend a Kleenex. Paper towels, many of them have texture. And when you start doing that, you're actually imposing the texture on the paper, and it looks a little weird. So there we go. Your turn.
So I'm going to go very light initially. You know, in watercolor, you want to paint from light to dark. And this has got, if you look at the walls, there are a lot of subtleties of color and value, and especially up in the roof, but down and through here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off a lot lighter. But before I do that, I want to show, bring your attention to this, where the wall meets the ground, some of these spots. You notice that there are grasses sticking up in front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the wall, and then I'm going to come down to where the grasses are going to be, and I'm going to switch the angle of the brush from here to here. You remember when we did the thatched roof on the front? And I'm going to kind of do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be laying in the background for these grasses. It will stay white until I color them in if I wish to. And so I just want to draw your attention to that because it's going to happen kind of fast, and I don't want to lose you on it. I'm going to start now. In the original painting there, I started off with a burnt sienna and a purple almost everywhere. And I'll probably come back in and play with that. But right now I'm going to start with 3 colors, raw sienna, burnt sienna, and purple. And I'm just going to do what I did when we did the painting last week on those shacks, blending those 3 colors to make it look
like, no matter what angle you look at, you're gonna see a different color in the old wood. So I'm gonna start at the top, right here. There's a bead of water, I don't want that. And I'm gonna dry brush it. And I'm gonna bring it down. Okay, here's the brushwork I was talking about. See that? See where the grasses are sticking up? It's this white paper now that.
Which part is it on your brown paint? Which part of that is it? That little outside shed on the edge?
Right here.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So, how about, a little burnt sienna right on top of that? Dry brush it. Same kind of thing. And then I'll come in with some purple. Dry brush it. Blend it. There we go. Okay, so that's side one. Now I'm gonna go a little faster because, once again, I don't want to occupy the entire time demonstrating my painting skills or lack thereof. See all that? That's done with the chisel edge of the brush, as I call it. 4 tries. Oh my God, I painted over the window. Holy cow, what am I gonna do now? This is where I'm gonna try to get really loosey. Loosey-goosey, as they say. There's a piece of white right there. Oh my God. I'm not worried about it. Okay, I'm gonna let this dry because I don't want to blend this wall into the interior, so I'm gonna go over here next. Same color combinations. Negatively paint these. That doesn't really matter too much. Next. Okay. Choose. Too much purple. Right there, I think. Brown it up a little bit. There we go. Okay. So by using the chisel edge of the brush coming down to the ground, basically what I did was I just kind of chopped the outline of those grasses using this technique. You gotta make that noise when you do it. I'm gonna use raw sienna to begin with. I'm just gonna do this. Maybe a little bit of burnt sienna in there to change the value a little bit. But I'm just using the side of the brush. And I'm just putting in this field of weeds down through here. And that's, I'm gonna do one more thing. I'm gonna take a little bit of fingerful of water. So I do that, the water creates droplets of texture in all of that. So that's pretty easy. Let me go to mixing up some Hooker's Green Deep and a little bit of ultramarine blue. This will be our foliage. And make sure this is dry. And so I'm just going to cut right around the side of that building. And same technique that I did before for the grasses. That's got too much water on it. Like that. Okay. Okay, that's basically all I need there. And I do the same thing over the ridge of the house. Now before you do this, make sure that your sky is dry as all get out, right? Okay, now, I've got a stovepipe chimney here. I'm gonna negatively paint it. Watch what I'm doing. Boom, boom, and then when it's horizontal, this is easier. There we go. Boom. There. See what I did? I just painted the background and there's the chimney. Magically appears. So I can't leave that series of squares there, so I'm just going to take a flat brush.
Like a tree.
So I'm just using the very edge of the flat brush. I'm just doing interesting foliage type shapes. Together until they were all exactly the same color. So when I picked up the color on my brush, part of the brush had more blue than green, some had more green than blue. So I got that. You can't plan that. It just happens. That's what makes watercolor so marvelous. Paints itself. Just be, what's the word? Just be bold and confident and just let it rip. So I've got raw sienna, burnt sienna, a little bit of purple. I'm going to add. No, I'm not going to add anything else to that. And I'm going to start. I'm just going to go ahead and drop a little bit of water. That's way more than a little bit. Drop a little bit of water up and through here. And I'm going to have in my hand a clean brush with clean water that I can blend with, to encourage the transition from some of these colors one to the other. So I'm just going to start right here with, maybe I'll follow that design a little bit. This is raw sienna, a little bit of burnt sienna, and just going to blend those colors out a little bit. Got a little bit of purple. I'm going to go kind of watery with the purple. Stop and blend it out with the clean water. Now try to leave some white. I don't want to do it all the way across. Back with just a little bit of light burnt sienna. some cerulean blue. I'll throw that in and wet the paper a little bit. And water, just blend it. To lift some of that color a little bit. Wet the paper a little bit. And then add a little bit of purple. Blend it with a clean wet brush. And lift some of the color. There. There you go. It looks kind of strange, but we'll put some architectural detail in there to give it the appearance of a ragged tin roof. But that's kind of looking at something that's been out in the sun for a very, very long time. You don't have to follow quite the same color sequence that I use, but you pretty much have the idea as to how that works. A little bit of like a raw sienna, small amount of very light burnt sienna. I use purple and cerulean blue and just blended them together, making sure I didn't get too dark, because I want to make sure that it appears that sunlight is glancing off this very odd colored roof. Just to the inside, got to be kind of careful of the roof. That's got to be, yeah, that's probably dry enough. No, maybe not. Nah, heck with it. If it messes up, then you know why I hesitated. I'm going to go with a darker color for the interior. And I'm going to create that dark color by using burnt sienna and purple, or blue violet, as it says on the tube. And I'm going to change the combination of those colors, because I've got two pools together, right? One is pure burnt sienna, one is pure purple, and I'm going to mix them in the middle, and I can slide to the burnt sienna or slide to the purple on my brush without doing a lot of mixing to get what I want. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out right here. I'm going to go a little darker. So this is a nasty overhang. And dry brush it. I'm going to leave a lot of white. And in some cases, while it's still wet, I'm going to lighten it in spots. So I begin to get an interesting interior without painting the whole thing a solid color, left and right. There's my window. There's that support beam right there. Painting over the bicycle.
lines, were those part of the sketch?
What again?
The white lines that you just put in, was that part of the sketch?
That's that beam.
Put that right there?
That's this.
Below that.
beam.
The other is on the, what
Yeah.
you just painted.
Yeah, right there.
No,
No, just improvise.
no, this, what I'm doing is I'm going really, very random here, creating an interesting interior. If I did the whole thing, solid color or a combination of two colors, it would be incredibly flat and not very interesting. So that's kind of the first step. Down in here, we'll put some darks in later, we've got some piles of wood. I'll just go ahead and put in some of this dark down in here, because they're going to be separated by some darks, like this and that. And I'll leave it, no, I'll tell you what I can do is, that's dry enough. Just take the chisel edge and just touch it. And I got created those panes on the interior window. So what I want to do at some point, and I probably could do it now, but let me just show you what I intend to do later, is I come back in and darken, and as I darken these sides a little bit, especially under the roof, what I'm beginning to do is pop the exterior wall and the roof. See what I'm saying right there? This is now coming forward, and that's going backwards. But I'm not gonna dwell on it, I just wanna show you where we're going, because you're thinking, how does that equate to that at this stage in the painting? It's gonna get there. Okay. Please be sure that the edge of your roof is dry. If it's not, you're gonna blend this interior paint up into the roof. And you're not gonna want that, because you want a complete distinction between this and that. Got the telephone pole sitting up there. So I'm gonna be consistent. Right now I've got a lot of burnt sienna and combinations of other colors. I'm going to use burnt sienna, and I'm going to use also the purple to be kind of consistent. And I'll do this with the darks of my shadows. And I'm going to take a flat brush, and I'm just going to use the flat brush to give you some detail on the telephone pole. Yeah. Just touching the chisel edge of it like that. Now I'll play with that a little bit, because when we decide where our light's coming from, that cylindrical pole is gonna have to have a shadow on it. Then I have this other pole coming up, which is probably where the electricity comes into the shack. I'll just put a little cross piece on it just for fun, like that. So I'm gonna use the same color, and I'm gonna change brushes here. Kind of come with a pointed round brush. Where is it? Consistent with the colors, mixture of purple and burnt sienna. I'm gonna get pretty dark, which means a lot less water. And I'm gonna have clean, damp blending brush in my other hand. I'm going to start on this side, and I'm going to go that far. Not going to go any further than that. Paint's wet. I'm going to wet the paper underneath it. I'm just going to drag this down like that. So now we're getting some shadows under the eaves. And wet brush, damp brush I should say. Bring the shadows down like that. Pop, pop. That's what you want. And once again, this brush has different amounts of these two colors on it, depending upon how I swept it through the two puddles of paint. I'm gonna stop right there. Now I want this line here to be fairly thick, because what I want to do is I want to have it enough that I can wet the paper underneath it with a damp brush, and then just drag these colors down. If that line was too thin, then when I go to blend it, the line itself will disappear. Gotta have one side that's gonna stay on the hard edge. Now watch, I'm doing negative shapes here. And what this is helping me with, just gonna stop there, is to highlight the jagged nature of this roof. Pop that up a little bit more, a little bit more color in there. I'm using the point of the brush to push up into the roof line. Wet brush, damp brush, sorry. Bring it down. And what that does for me is it highlights the very rustic nature of that roof. And we'll put in some highlights later. So, telephone pole, utility pole if you will, and then those same colors of burnt sienna and purple, using that to create the darks along the edge of the outside wall. And once again, I'm gonna use raw sienna, but I'm gonna darken it just a little bit with burnt sienna. And I'm gonna basically use the same technique that I did before by coming in with the chisel edge of this brush and coming up into the whites that I have, and then coming down like that. Yeah, I don't like that at all. Okay, we're gonna erase that. I'm gonna erase that completely. That is not going to work. However, I'm going to continue on when the grass is next to the building. Just using the chisel edge. If you notice, I'm not occupying all of the white spaces. In other words, these white tufts of grass. I'm just leaving it that way. Some in here, and through here. That was a mistake. I'm going to come back there and play with that a little bit later. Okay, so I've got the grasses going. Now I'm going to talk or think a little bit about putting in some of these windows with this dark that I have of burnt sienna and purple. And be consistent. So I'm gonna take the chisel edge of this 1/2-inch flat brush, and I'm going to do a swipe. See it?
Do another swipe. Got it. Underneath, another one, or two. Like that. And then, I've got this damp blending brush in my hand. My light's gonna come from this side, so if I put in a sill there, and an undersill there, notice the lines are big enough that I can take a damp brush and blend that this way. This one's white. Got another one over here.
And what color are you using there?
Purple, burnt sienna, very dark,
Same
which
with
means
the
less water. Okay, so just using the brush, swiping it this way. Again. 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 And then offset. This way. That way. And kind of like that. Blending that shadow takes that window frame and pulls it forward. And it was done, you know, like that. Easy. The thing is, as I said before, if you're gonna blend a line to give you a shadow, you've gotta make that line thick enough. So one end where you want it to be hard stays hard. And then the opposite end is wide enough where you can grab it with a damp brush and bring it down. You notice that in each case they went this way. Not that way, not that way, but this way. And the reason for that is the light is coming from down here like that. So the shadows are gonna fall on the opposite side of this L, if you will, like that. Okay, so I did very quickly, I darkened up some raw sienna with burnt sienna, put some of these grasses in, reserve some of the whites that are going up. That creates a lot of interest. And then I did the two windows.
What brush did you use for that?
For the windows, I used a 1/2 inch flat brush. And I just used the edge and went like that.
Okay.
Just a little bit, like a 1/4 of an inch. So they were rectangular and not square. Colors again. I'm gonna go dark, dark, the same mixture. Dark means less water. Burnt sienna and blue violet. It's time to get on the specs here, I think. Don't want to make too many errors. So I'm gonna go ahead and start at the top. That was pretty dark to begin with. Now you can see it's tried lighter. I'm gonna go darker with it. I'm just putting in color. This guy might have paintings hanging on the walls, who knows? Put a good strong windowsill there, top, that. I like some of this stuff. It was pretty dark before, but now it's lighter. So always dries about 20% lighter. Let's do that here.
stuff going, excuse me, going on in here. Lines and horizontals, and here's that bicycle. Forgot about him. That's all you need. Just doing this real quick down here where the wood is. I think what I want to do is blend that down this way a little bit. So, just a lot of crazy stuff. I don't want to cover up everything I did before. Okay, so we got these trash cans over here. I'm just going to take a little bit of rose and add it to this mixture of purple and burnt sienna. I'm just going to take the brush and I'm just going to follow this line like that. Darker over there. And then maybe this one, a little different color, a little bit more purple perhaps. No, it's not that close. There's two garbage cans in there. Let me go ahead and stop there. Let you play with the interior a little bit. I did it real fast. Probably wouldn't hurt if I came in and used a damp brush while that paint on the interior is a little wet. Maybe blended some of these colors a little bit, soften them. It's not quite so harsh. So there's a lot of junk going on in there, and hopefully if I stand back and look at it, it looks like what I wanted it to look like. Yeah. So there's a variation of light, variation of shade, value, and all of that. The window in the middle probably could be a little darker, but I'm not going to worry about it for this segment. I'm going to take a 1-inch flat brush and going to come into the same dark mix of burnt sienna and purple, and using the chisel edge of the flat brush, just like I did up here on the telephone pole. I'm just going to go ahead and put in these fence posts. Now there they are. They look like I just put them on with a piece of tape. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little too much. Just going to take some clean water. I'm going to blend these out. Probably did it a little too soon because the paint was so wet. I can fix that by just bringing this up like that. And then with a rigger brush, same color combination, I can put in the
you notice that the wires presented in a different fashion each time. Once again, creates interest. If it was straight across, straight across, straight across, straight across, it would be so symmetrical that it would not be interesting. Okay, up here at our telephone pole, I promised that I would come back and put in some darks right along the side of the pole. So that creates some dimension, as it's got a shadow on one side, not the other. I'm going to pursue now these cracks in the roof. I don't want to overdo it, but I'm going to follow the roof line. That one in particular. I don't want them to be the same length. I don't want them to be equidistant apart. You can see where the cracks have formed. I can definitely exploit that. I've got the chimney sitting there, and I'm going to put a shadow on the opposite side of where this light's coming from, right there. Since it's cylindrical, I'm going to take a little bit of water. I'm just going to blend the interior edge just a little bit. Now we got to be consistent with our shadows here. So this guy has, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a clean, flat Kleenex in my hand. I'm going to take this guy down, and I'm going to touch it flat. Soften and lift that shadow. Didn't do a very good job. I went way too fast, I think. But, and then with a small rigger brush again, let's go ahead and connect some of these guys together. And let's see, got all that, got all that. Let's just finish up the front of the grasses here. I'm just gonna soften some of that a little bit. I'm using this edge, like this, flat edge of it, to do that. And then with a rigger, I can put in a little bit more detail. Just excuse me, just to emphasize the height and the randomness. What I just did, using basically raw sienna and maybe a little bit of burnt sienna in there. Just picking that up off the palette and hitting it like that. I'm not happy about that at all. Let me see. Let's just get some water on it. Really set up quick. It's not going anywhere.
a little bit. That's better. Okay. Oh, birds. We need birds, right? There we go. I hope that wasn't too complex for everybody. It did take a little longer than I thought, but it's a challenging composition, but a lot of fun.